The immune system is a complex system that affects every other body system we have, and oftentimes food sensitivities are a result of an inappropriate immune function. Now, there's other ways that we can react to foods and have problems. For example, if there's IBS present, we can have certain issues with certain foods, but let's lump those into the digestive dysfunction category, and let's focus on the immune system food sensitivities today. So if the immune system is reacting to a food, symptoms can pop up in any body system. You can have headaches, low energy, skin problems, weight problems, hormone problems, attention problems, anxiety. These types of things tend to be maybe more common things that I see as food sensitivities, but at the end of the day, any symptom in any body part is fair game when it comes to food sensitivities. Basically, what happens is that you're in a state of chronic inflammation, and inflammation hits us at our weak spots. That's why this whole world of food sensitivities is so mysterious and complicated. Now, food sensitivities are common. The body will not be able to reach its state of optimal functioning if we continue to eat a food that our immune system is reacting to. That's because it's busy doing something else when it should be focusing on looking out for viruses and bacteria and making sure that our immune system is nice and balanced so that we're not at risk of developing autoimmune dysfunctions. So when we start to think of the immune system in terms of energy, and we start to think of energy in terms of money, we start to realize how much energy we're actually wasting by not addressing our food sensitivities. Now, the most common foods to be sensitive to, that's a complicated question. So what I generally see coming back on an IgG food sensitivity blood test are casein in cow's milk, gluten in certain grains, including wheat, and egg white. Those are my top three that I tend to see most often. Of course, there's lots of other ones. That's the immune system mediated. Now, I do want to talk about food colorings, dyes, and sugar for a second, because those are not in the same category. I consider those foods to hit the nervous system more than the immune system, okay? So I'm not seeing these coming up on food sensitivity tests. Doesn't mean they're not a problem, and it doesn't mean they're not important. But they're not popping up on food sensitivity tests to the right degree, considering what problems they can cause people. Generally, anxiety, depression, moodiness, and hyperactivity are the most common things that the sugar, the dyes, and the food colorings tend to cause. So that said, elimination of a food that the body is reacting to is not easy by any means. And generally speaking, the biggest problem is the social consequence, really, at the end of the day, for most people. We will have a hard time deciding to eliminate a food because of our perceived need for it, for our personal need for that food. But when we decide to eliminate, the thing that gets us bogged down most is the social stuff. So if you're a kid and you have to go to school and not order pizza on pizza day, or to order maybe different pizza, even if that's available, which it's usually not, bringing things to school that maybe smell a little different or look a little different to the other kids, you're going to get curious kids coming over saying, "Whoa, what are you eating? That looks really weird." And as much as that is not necessarily a picking on thing, it's usually a curiosity thing, even the most confident child is going to get tired of hearing, "That looks weird." For adults, it's really about not wanting to make a fuss, I'm finding. So for example, being handed a dessert at your aunt's house. "Oh, Auntie Ruth, is there graham wafer crumbs in this dessert? I guess you didn't realize that graham wafer crumbs have gluten in them." "I didn't realize that at first either." "No problem." Or if you're at a coffee shop, "Oh, hi, just wanted to make sure this latte actually has the almond milk in it. It tastes like it has cow's milk in it. Can you just double check for me, please? Thanks." Bear in mind that if you do eat a food that you're sensitive to, oftentimes the consequences of that last 4 to 5 days in our body. And so oftentimes if we're sitting there making that decision, do I speak up or do I just eat it, bear in mind that the worst of it's going to be over in the first 6 to 8 hours, but that you're still going to get some residual effects 4 to 5 days later. And that's my clinical experience. I don't have the literature to support that. That's just what I see. Now, the ignorance is bliss factor. That's an interesting one. The immune system's funny. what it'll do is something called downregulate, which means that over the years you develop a food sensitivity, but as you slowly develop a stronger and stronger sensitivity, the body slowly down regulates the intensity of your symptoms, which then leads you to eventually find yourself in a naturopath's office saying, I really just don't feel like myself. I can't put my finger on it. I've got this problem, that problem, that problem, that problem, and that problem. But really at the end of the day, I'm just not myself. I'm not optimal. And that's generally what happens. There's another interesting thing that the body will do is that it will actually evolve its symptoms, the way that it tells you it has a food sensitivity. So you might have started off with maybe chronic ear infections or throat infections. Maybe that eventually got stopped and you grew out of it. And maybe you started to get some skin problems, dry skin, acne, or eczema. Maybe that finally subsided, and maybe you have hormone fluctuations or migraines, weight problems, food cravings, food addictions, those types of things. And so that's a common thing that I see is the evolution of the way the body lets you know there's a problem. Now, when it comes to eliminating, there's also the concept of reintroducing, and this is kind of neat because reintroduction, think of it as information gathering, okay? The body seems to need about 8 weeks to really truly reboot from an immune system reaction, and for kids I find it's a little less, it's about 4 weeks, so a month. A lucky person is going to be able to get rid of a food for 2 weeks and then immediately reintroduce it and notice, oh, okay, yeah, that's a pretty obvious response. Yep, I have a food sensitivity. But for a lot of people, it takes about 8 weeks to really let the body down, regulate, upregulate, whatever it needs to do, basically reboot from the inflammation process. During those 8 weeks, you might notice that you start to feel better right away. You might notice that at the 3-week mark, you're kind of like, I don't feel a whole lot different. And then by the time the 8-week mark comes, I don't feel a lot different. But then when you reintroduce that food, you get very strong symptoms. And that's a common thing that people will, that will occur with people, is that they're actually not noticing that they're starting to feel better. It doesn't mean that you're developing a more of a sensitivity by eliminating that food. That's not the case. What the case is that the body is rebooting, right? And so you may not notice that you're slowly starting to function more optimally. And you might not notice until you reintroduce and go, oh wow, yeah, okay, I guess I was feeling a lot better. And that's really what's happening, is the body is functioning more optimally. You give it that food, it functions less optimally, you get more noticeable symptoms than you had before if you were eating on a daily basis. Okay? When you reintroduce a food, you're looking for any kind of symptom at all. Anything's fair game. Could be a return of your old symptoms that you were trying to get rid of. Could be that you just feel tired. You might get a big bowel movement, or you might become more flatulent, those types of things. You might actually get constipated. Anything's fair game. Just follow your instincts and look carefully. When you reintroduce a food, just make sure that you don't, if you react to a food that you reintroduce, but that you eliminated more than one food at a time, okay, so you're going to you eliminated 3 foods, okay? When you bring one food back in, if you don't react, fine, great. Just reintroduce the next food the next day, okay? If you did react in some way, you want to make sure that you give your body 3 days to just reset from that experience before you reintroduce your next food. And that's just to make sure that you get the right information from the reintroduction process. Okay, so the reintroduction, that's your test, that's your information gathering. Okay. Another thing that you want to remember when you're reintroducing foods is that if you did eliminate more than one food, make sure you don't eliminate them both at the same time, and it's actually pretty easy to do. For example, if you got rid of cow's dairy and sugar, you don't want to be reintroducing with yogurt or ice cream. You want to just reintroduce with milk, right? If you eliminated egg and gluten, you don't want to be eating bread that has egg in its ingredient labels. So just be aware of that if you're going to be doing this on your own. And of course, it's always better to do it under the supervision of a naturopathic doctor. But I do know that a lot of you out there are doing this by yourself and then waiting for that to then come into the naturopath to get the details sorted out with your physical dysfunctions. And so those are things to remember, okay? Now, let me just get on my soapbox for a second, if you don't mind, and say that really I don't want you eliminating when you don't have to. And the reason for that is that most of the foods that we are most commonly eliminating from our diet, egg, dairy, and gluten, those are really rich sources of nutrients. Those are really healthy foods at the end of the day, unless we're sensitive to it, okay? So if we're sensitive to a food, as I mentioned, that creates a state of inflammation, okay? That's gonna cause an unhappy state in your digestive system, which we think is going to decrease your ability to absorb the nutrients both from that food and from the other foods that you're eating, okay? It's also going to be creating a state of inflammation through the general body, which is going to be increasing your need for all nutrients. So if there is a food sensitivity, my stance and the stance of other naturopaths, but I can't speak for all of us, okay? There's lots of opinions when it comes to this sort of thing. But in my personal experience in the 9 years I've been working, people's bodies function more optimally when the food sensitivity is out of the picture completely. But for the people who are eliminating and they don't have to, I really discourage you from doing that, and I would encourage you to really just to get a nice balanced diet that you feel good about personally. Because gluten, for example, is not a bad thing. It's a protein. In fact, in some cultures, it's actually extracted and used as a protein source for lots and lots of different reasons. It's a good thing unless your immune system reacts to it. Okay, so at the end of the day, I have to eliminate gluten from my diet. Gluten-free foods are not healthy. They're full of potato starch and modified cornstarch and lots of other modified things and sugars and all that sort of thing. And they're very devoid of nutrients, okay? Almond milk, it's great. You know, rice milk, soy milk, they're all great. But they're not milk. If you look at milk's nutrient profile, almond milk is simply not biologically equivalent. It's just not. And that's just the way it is. So do what your body feels best doing, and follow your instincts at the end of the day. And of course, if you have any questions at all, if you want to talk about this and how you can get your body functioning optimally with the diet that suits you best. Everybody needs a different diet. Everybody needs a different combination. Let's find the right combination for you. Thanks for listening to this soapbox moment. Thanks for listening to the video. Take care of yourselves and each other. Bye for now.